some foolish people out here who look at their personal relations with white folk, and they have good white friends. And I'm not doubting the sincerity of the friendship. Not at all. Not at all. I do not doubt that blacks and whites can be truly friendly, and we should be friendly as people. And I don't see any problem with having those friends, you know. But do not confuse your personal relations with the relations between groups. Do not always assume that the dynamics that determine your personal relationships are the same dynamics that can be used between groups. That's a serious error that a lot of people make. I live by the code, that's my eye. Whipping vegan food up in my pot. Why they claim I acted so unruly? Cause I'm listening to while it move Rudy.
Peace, everyone. Welcome to another Geechee Motivated Conversations. Today we're talking about retirement, all things that concerns it, especially our people. I have my good brother with us. Go ahead and introduce yourself, brother. Can you hear me? I think you're on mute. Oh. Yeah. I think you're still on mute, yo. I can't hear you. See if you can take the headphones out right quick. I couldn't hear you earlier. Can't hear you. Hold on, let me try something. Can you hear me now? Nah. Happened over there. All right, give us a second while we get this technical difficulties. Try to go out the studio, then come back and see if it works. Like come back onto the link. All right, so give us a second while we work through some technical difficulties real quick. Thank y'all for coming in. All right, can you hear me? Man, I don't know what's going on with that mic. It was working earlier. Anybody who's watching, can y'all hear him? Because I can't hear him. I don't know if y'all can hear him. Comment on the screen if you can hear him.
Let's see, 1, 2. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
You can hear me?
Yep.
Okay, yeah, I just changed the settings.
All right.
All right.
Well, yeah, go ahead, introduce yourself, and then we'll get right started. Sorry for the delay. All right,
yeah, my name is Heru Ofori-Atta.
brother. So, this might be a unconventional conversation around retirement, but we definitely want to kind of give some content to our people on some thoughts around it, and especially your experience in it. So, first, so that people are clear, how would you, what was retirement to you? What does it mean to you? And then, what has it been like for you in your life?
So my situation is quite different because I am not retirement age. I'm not even 50 years old yet. I'm in my 40s. I'm 48. And I have been retired since I was 27 years old. And I I retired when I was 27. So my story is that I went to law school and became a lawyer, and I practiced for a few years. Now, I strategically chose where I was going to live because very early in my life, I understood that you have this one life and you have to optimize it. So I was born in Africa and I was raised in Chicago. And then I went to university in Boston, and then I went to law school in Boston. And Chicago and Boston are very cold places. And so when you finish law school, you can choose which state you want to take the bar exam in, where you get licensed to practice law. So I decided that I was going to choose a place where everyone goes on vacation, right? That I wanted to make my life a vacation, basically. So I was thinking about Hawaii, California, or Florida. And very simply, I found out that they have mango trees in southern Florida, in Miami. So I decided literally that I was going to go and take the bar in Florida, the Florida bar. So I moved to South Beach in Miami, which is a vacation spot, but people live there. You know, I mean, the thing is that when you see that there's a place that you would like to vacation, you have to ask yourself why you don't just live there, because there are people who live in these places where you like to vacation.
Right.
So how can you make that happen? So I did that. I looked at that when I was in my early 20s. So I chose that I was going to live in Miami, and not only in Miami, I was going to live in the beach. So I lived in Miami Beach, took the bar exam. I happened to pass, and then I began practicing law. Now, I'm somebody who never ever wanted to be an employee. That's just something in my own DNA. It was not an accomplishment to me to get a job.
Right.
So I started out with my own law office. So I had my own law office when I finished law school in '98. So that would have made me 26 years old. And then I practiced law for about a year and a half. And then after a year and a half, I decided to retire. I had one big case, a probate case, where someone left a huge estate, and I was able to, under the law, get 3% of the estate in terms of transferring it over to everyone. So it was a huge estate, so I had a lump sum of money, and I decided to retire. And at this time, I also became a poet. So I traveled the world doing poetry as a spoken word poet and speaking at colleges and universities all across the United States on African history, African American politics, Pan-Africanism, and all that. And that's what my poetry was about. And I did that for about 10 years. Right. So I began living a life and designing a life that was to my specifications, right? So the key is, to the people listening, is that, if you have children, you start them out early as to the trajectory of their life, where they're able to really think it out and design their lives. Many people, they have life happening to them, right? Instead of actually designing their life. And so most people's happiness is actually accidental.
Right.
So I believe in planned happiness, not accidental happiness. So I did that from a very early age. And where I am right now, I've been an entrepreneur. I don't work for anyone. I wake up when I want. I sleep when I want. I travel when and where I want. I don't have to answer to anybody. I don't have a boss. I don't have a supervisor. My children will never have to fill out a job application or a resume, and we'll be able to live anywhere in the world. And we can get into the details of that. But I just wanted to explain that to you. Now, one thing before I stop, I know this was a very thorough explanation, but it really culminated into the fact that when I was living in South Beach, Miami Beach, I would spend a lot of time at the beach, right? I lived literally 2 blocks from the beach, from the ocean. And I would go there during the day because, I have my own law office, so I only work maybe 3 days a week. So I had a lot of weekdays free. I love having Mondays free, Wednesdays free, because I knew that's when everybody was working. That's the beginning of the week, and then that's hump day. And I loved kind of relishing in the fact that I was free to do what I wanted. So I would go to the beach on a regular weekday around 10 a.m., 11 a.m. I'm there. And most of the people you see are, wealthy people. And old people, really, that you would see at the beach during those hours. You know, the young people and the young adults usually came to the beach on the weekends when they were free from work. But what I saw was, one time I saw a lot of old people on the beach, but one time I saw somebody, an old man in a wheelchair. And in that wheelchair, he had to stop before the sand started. You know, on the beach, you have like a walkway, and he couldn't go on the sand because wheelchairs can't go on sand. And I looked at it, man, and I was like, this guy worked all his life so that he could actually spend some time at the beach.
Wow.
But by the time he could actually spend time at the beach, he couldn't even go to the beach because he was so old and sick. And I said, I do not want to be that person where I'm in a wheelchair and these are, you know, the freest days of my life and I can't even enjoy it because I'm too old and sick. So it has a lot to do with aging gracefully. It has a lot to do with health. It has a lot to do with diet. It has a lot to do with planning your life. And so when I saw that image and I saw that that wasn't going to be me, I even got more serious about planning my life.
Right. No, I appreciate that story. Especially the last part, because that kind of leads me to my next question. And I believe a lot of your business now is in the health world. And so you see in that story, seeing that guy, knowing your story of kind of having a design for your life. What's some advice for folks to make sure that they live in their healthiest life, rather now or even by the time they get to that age? Like, what's some advice you have around that?
Right. So I would say that the number one cause of, I'd say probably 98% of illnesses is a thing called inflammation. Right? So I'm going to talk about that briefly. When you start studying medicine, you will find that the suffix for most diseases ends with the word itis. So you would have things like colitis, you know, you would have prostatitis, you would have gingivitis, you know, and what you find out is that itis is Latin for burning or fire, flame, which is the root word of inflammation. And so when you see so many sicknesses are associated with itis, then they're telling you that these sicknesses are directly related to inflammation. And the way inflammation happens is that when you are eating certain foods, your body is responding to it, or if you have injury, your body's responding to it by actually adding heat to that area, and you start getting mucus to protect you. But what happens is that if that happens all the time, it stops circulation. It's a breeding ground for diseases, a breeding ground for bacteria, viruses, and what have you. The number one cause of inflammation is sugar. And we know that because of what sugar can do to the hardest part of your body, which is your teeth, right? If you look at your teeth, and that's why they say a lot of times the answers to your problems are right under your nose. So literally, you can look at your teeth. And if sugar can burn a whole teeth, right, which we call cavities, what is sugar doing to the soft internal organs in your body? Right? A lot of people don't think of that. If sugar can do that to your teeth, which is the hardest part of your body, literally burn a hole in your teeth that we call cavities, what is sugar doing to the internal parts of your body? And we find out that sugar is the number one cause of inflammation. And when we talk about sugar, we talk about not just like white table sugar, but sugar causing foods that are what you would call simple sugars that have a high glycemic index. That's white rice, that's pasta, that's soda drinks, that's white flour, that's any of these foods that cause inflammation. And they are just inflammatory foods. And when the inflammation takes place, the inflammation takes root based on your genetic makeup. Whatever is the weakest part of your body, that's where inflammation will take place. Based on your genetic makeup. That's why people would have diabetes in their family, because it's a passed on trait that your, you know, that your organs are actually, you know, the weakest. So you would end up getting that type of a situation. So what we realize is that if you can have an anti-inflammatory diet, that is foods that do not have a high glycemic index, foods that are devoid of sugar, foods that do not cause mucus buildup, like dairy, then what is going to happen is that you'll be able to live a longer life. The other side of it is that when you look at the characteristics of getting old, what do we call, like, why do we call someone elderly? Well, they're usually walking slow, they're hunched over, they look like a person who just ran a marathon. It looks like a tired person. We say they're elderly. So here's the deal. Most of the foods, we have an organic body. And in this organic body, the most efficient foods and nutritious foods are organic foods. And you have a different type of food called processed foods. And these are foods that are made in the laboratory. They are man-made foods. They are not made by nature. So what happens is that every time you're eating food and it is processed food, food made in the laboratory, your body reacts to it in a way where your body's white blood cells and immune system is activated. So your body's immune system is activated because it cannot recognize what you're putting into your body. It recognizes it as a foreign invader. So imagine if every time you eat food, you're stimulating your immune system. Most people's immune system is completely overworked. That's why you can have somebody who's over 60, who's 60 years old and looks like they're 80. And you can have someone who's 60 and looks like they're 35. We've seen those people. We've seen people who are 50, 60 years old and look like they're in their 30s. And we've seen people who are 50, 60 look like they're 80.
Right.
And the difference is in their diet. Every single day, what are you eating? Most people are eating 3-4 times a day. And imagine if every time you're eating, you're stimulating your immune system. You have not been able to give your immune system a rest. That's why sleep is so important. And that's why eating well is so important. That's why fasting is so important. They've noticed that when people fast, their immune system actually starts being rebuilt for just 24 hours of fasting, because you're giving your immune system a break. But if you've never given your immune system a break since you were 18 years old, imagine what's going to happen when you're 40 and what you're going to look like. Because I see people I went to high school with, and they don't look like me at all. They don't look like me at all. I've seen people I went to high school with, and they look like they're 60 years old. You understand? And if it wasn't for the gray hair, if I, dyed my hair black, I look like I'm 22, 23. You understand? But that's because I paid attention to these things and I understand these things. You still stay active. You still, don't overeat. And when you do eat, it's actually natural foods that the body will synthesize naturally and normally and not fight against. And that is the key, is that you don't want to save your money, hit retirement age, and then all of a sudden you've got all these types of sicknesses, because the majority of people over 40 years old are on some type of medication, whether it be diabetes medication or high blood pressure medication.
That's crazy. So you talked a little bit about like life and knowing certain things that wasn't gonna happen, like you working for somebody, those things. And then you also talk about retiring early. And so that just gives me this idea of like purpose, right? And people talk about it all the time. Would you say that you know or have found your purpose? And then like, when did you make the commitment to that? Like, at what point did you make the commitment to like, this is what I'm gonna do with my life?
So, as a kid, I was always fascinated with people's biographies. So I used to read the biographies of great people. And when you do that, you start to understand a roadmap of how people became great. And no one became great without a certain degree of discipline, right? So I saw that very early. I mean, one of my early heroes was Malcolm X. I read his autobiography when I was 18 years old. It transformed my life. And Malcolm X's life literally can be summed up as, pre-becoming Malcolm X, he was a man of no discipline. And becoming Malcolm X, and what necessitated for him to become Malcolm X was discipline, right? The discipline in study. He talked about the discipline in diet, As a matter of fact, what struck me in my 20s was that when I was doing my deep research on Malcolm X, it lasted for years. His doctors who did the autopsy on Malcolm X said he had, after he got shot and killed, they said that he had the cleanest insides that they've ever seen in a human being, because they had to do surgery on him. And I remember Malcolm X talking about eating one meal a day only. And, Elijah Muhammad had written the book, How to Eat to Live. And so when you look at a lot of these people from the Nation of Islam, because I grew up in Chicago, so I would see them on the street selling newspapers every day when, I was going to school. And I would talk to a lot of them. And a lot of these men were over their 50s, man. And they looked like they were in their 30s. And that always had, that had an impression on me. So I knew that diet was a serious part of where I needed to go in my life. And then I've had diabetes in my life, right? And so with diabetes, basically you have a pancreas that cannot process glucose properly. And so the leveling of glucose has to do with insulin. And so you're not producing insulin properly. And so someone with diabetes literally just having, they're having an allergic reaction to sugar, right? And they usually will have pancreatitis as well, which is the inflammation of the prostate. So I remember being in my 20s and literally, having to urinate 4 times in 1 hour. I remember, and that's when I was eating the regular American diet. I was eating donuts and, all types of sweet things, and my gums started bleeding, man. And my eyesight started getting blurry, and I did a blood sugar test, and I was on the cusp of diabetes. And at that point, I made a dietary change, and I became a vegetarian, and I cut out sugar. And I've never had high blood sugar problems since. And I'm talking about I had it so bad that, like, if I ate something in the morning with sugar, I would literally have to, like, lay down and take a nap because I'd be so exhausted about an hour after. And that's not a normal thing. So I know that if I hadn't made this change in my 20s, I probably wouldn't be alive today at 48 in perfect health. So I knew that. I was aware of that. And later on, becoming a lawyer and learning analytical skills, I was able to later apply that into the health field, where I started doing my own health experiments. Because when I was in university, my major was science. So my major was biology and psychology. It was a neuroscience degree. So I had a scientific background. So that's what led me into doing experiments on herbs and my own extraction methods. And I started testing out the concoctions on myself, and the herbs, it was really, I was using olive leaves. And that's an interesting story unto itself, because I started with cannabis. I started doing cannabis science experiments because I had seen a documentary called Run from the Cure about a guy in Canada called Rick Simpson, who was reversing over 2,000 people's cancer. So I thought it was very interesting. So I started doing my own extractions, and I was using coconut oil, and he was using paint thinner. And paint thinner is carcinogenic, and if you don't boil it off correctly and evaporate it all correctly, you're going to get paint thinner into the cannabis oil. And so I use coconut oil. So I became an expert at that. And then a lot of people started contacting me to get the oils that I made. I'm talking about like a lot of people, especially when I would do lectures on it. And I couldn't, because cannabis is federally illegal in the United States. So I had to find another plant that could do what cannabis does in terms of reversing so many diseases. And the reason why it does that is because of a thing called the endocannabinoid system, which is responsible for homeostasis in the body, which is the perfect resting health of an organism. So I found another plant, and it turned out to be the leaves of the olive tree. So I started doing experiments with the leaves of the olive tree in my own extractions. So I wasn't buying olive leaf extract from, different companies. I was actually making it myself. And I developed my own formulas that were very strong, and it got rid of my eczema. I had eczema for over 20 years behind my ears, and it got rid of that like within a few days. Then I've also had asthma all my life, and it got rid of my asthma. So I started giving it to other people who had high blood pressure. It got rid of their high blood pressure. It got rid of high blood sugar, diabetes for people. And then I had people who had kidney failure, and it reversed their kidney failure. And then the final linchpin to it was that there were people with cancer, and their tumors started shrinking and going away. So I was, getting phone calls all over the place. This time I was living in the United States Virgin Islands, because my theme is to live where people vacation. So I was living in the U.S. Virgin Islands, and this was happening around 2015, and the demand started developing for my product that I turned it into an official business. And so that's why I have this company, Herbal Results. And it is, people can go on there right now, herbalresults.net. And we've gotten, live testimonials from people who have had major disease reversals using our products. And I started manufacturing the products, and, now have the factories for the product where we manufacture, thousands and thousands of bottles at a time. And people are able to, heal themselves with this. And so I always felt like I was going to do something big in life, but to be able to do something big in life, it's hard to work for someone else and do something big in life. Most of the people who've done big things in life were not employees, right? So that was the key, was not to be an employee. And I would say that anyone watching this show, if you want a blueprint to that, the most important book that I ever read. So there's two seminal books in my life. That is the autobiography of Malcolm X, when I read it when I was 18, which put me on a journey to be a conscious African, a Black man who understands where he is in the world and understands our history and our purpose and our responsibility. And that is, Black consciousness in its best form. And then I read a book in 2008 called The 4-Hour Work Week. The 4-Hour Work Week is by a gentleman called Tim Ferriss. And I read that book, and it transformed my life, because it shows you how to leverage the internet so that you can have different companies where you can live anywhere in the world and travel the world, because they're internet-based companies, and how you can automate making products where you don't even have to touch the products, and people order it and it's shipped to them. And it requires minimal effort from you, besides just, having a great product and having people speak well of your product, and having a good supply chain, system of delivery, and customer service. And it tells you how to do this step by step. And even though I read the book in 2008, it still applies in 2020. So since you're talking about retirement and you have this platform, I would definitely tell your listeners who are interested in being able to be free economically and live wherever you want in the world and have money coming in while you're sleeping, The 4-Hour Work Week is the book that changed my life, that made it possible for me to be able to no longer have to even go to an office, because I was working for myself, but as an attorney, but I only made money when I was working, when I was awake, which is the poor way to make money. Basically, you're selling your time, and there's a limited amount of time. So I went into product development, and I would advise anyone who wants to retire at an early age is to go into product development, have a great product, have great customer service, have great reviews, and go ahead and live the life that you wanted to live. And you'll find out a lot about yourself when you have all the time in the world and money is not an issue.
So tell me this, there's a word that seems to permeate every conversation, especially like the African saying, Black nationalists, but also just the retirement rhetoric. So my question is, what does wealth mean to you? What does that look like when you think of this concept of wealth? What does that look like?
Okay, so people confuse being rich with being wealthy, and you hear that all the time, right? So rich means you have a lot of money for yourself. Wealth means that you have choices for yourself and your generations to come. That's what wealth means. And notice I didn't say money. I said choices, because I remember taking an economics class and the professor asked, what is the definition of economics? And, you know, people had all different types of ideas. You know, 7 people tried to answer it, students in the class. And he said, no. He said, economics is the science of choice. And that really hit me, because I remember when I had $5 in my bank account. See, with $5 or being in poverty, it really means you don't have choices, right? You don't have money to book a ticket to get on a plane. You can't eat what you want. You might not even be able to take the bus because you don't have enough money. And what it does is it limits your choices. So what wealth is, so you can have a lot of money and not be wealthy, in the sense that you can work 100 hours a week and make, you know, a great paycheck, but you don't have time to yourself. You don't have, you know, I have many friends I went to law school with, and when they got out of law school, they were doing 80 hours a week. They were making maybe $200,000 a year, but they had no time to themselves. They had no time to their families. They had limited choices. So to me, it means nothing to have a lot of money or to make a lot of money, but not have time, right? And what people have to realize is that, and I've said this many times before, any society that you're living in, they let you know what's important and valued in that society based on how they punish you. I want everyone to listen carefully what I'm saying. Any society that you're living in lets you know what is important and valued in that society based on how they punish you, because punishment is a way of taking things away from you, right? So in the society of the United States, there's only 2 ways they punish you. One, they fine you, right? If you're convicted of a crime, they will fine you, where you have to pay a certain type of fee. So they're letting you know money is important. And then the second way that they punish you is to give you time in prison. So when people in prison, it's called doing time. You're doing time for the state. So they've let you know that the 2 most important things in this society is money and time. So he or she who controls their money and their time is free. And wealth and freedom are identical twins. If you don't have freedom, you don't have wealth. If you don't have wealth, you don't have freedom. Wealthy people don't have to answer to anybody. Even politicians answer to wealthy people. The people you voted for in these elections answer to wealthy people. The so-called most powerful people in these positions, and remember, they're in these positions for a limited amount of time. Wealthy people are wealthy for generations. You know, so it would seem most important for us to study the science of wealth, and that's the beautiful thing about it, is that wealth is actually a science. Wealth creation is a science. And because it's a science, that means that there's a formula that if everyone does the formula, they will get the results. That's what a science is, right? A science is that if you put acid to litmus paper, it's going to turn yellow or red. If you add base, something that is basic or alkaline to litmus paper, it's going to turn blue. This is science. You know, if you connect positive to negative in wires, you know, you get a certain type of result, and you'll get it every time. And so science is based on being able to replicate results. And wealth building is a science, which means that everyone can do it as long as everyone is taught the variables of the equation. And that is what this society has failed us, is that they do not teach us how to actually build wealth. When you go to school, you're not told how to set up a business. Even right now, you're not even told how to buy stocks. You're not told how to really buy real estate. And I'm telling you right now, I've got people who have MBA degrees, and they have to call me to get advice on stocks because their degree never ever prepared them to be a stock investor. You see what I'm saying? So the beautiful thing is that it's a science. So since it's a science, it can be replicated. And we're living in a time of the information age where you can teach yourself and learn anything and everything that you want. but they know that most people are going to waste their time with this tool called the internet and, use it to post pictures of what they just ate or their pets on the internet and say how cute it is, instead of actually digging deep and trying to find out how the hell did Warren Buffett become so rich? How the hell did these, people become so wealthy, and what are the characteristics and the traits of what wealthy people own, and what is their wealth based on? And most of them own stocks. They'll own some real estate, but it's really stocks that they own because it's easy to liquidate, it's easy to get in and get out. And that's why you will see, like during the pandemic, Mark Zuckerberg, the owner, the CEO of Facebook, or Jeff Bezos, his wealth went up by $2 billion in one day. And people don't know what that's about. It's about stock ownership. The price of their stock went up and they own millions of shares of stock. And so that's how their wealth goes up. And so once we start to understand this as a people, we'll be a lot better off, instead of using our money on depreciating things like cars and clothes and everything that really does not matter in terms of being wealthy and being free.
So there's always there's a follow-up question. There's always this conversation around, and there's different things about, Black folks are wasting their money. Then there's this buying power that Jared Ball debunked, and other people as well. But so when you look at our conditions economically, and planning for retirement or just being successful, are you gearing towards pushing financial literacy or a whole new economic shift of understanding or paradigm? Like what, is it this society or shifting to a whole nother economic paradigm?
So, so the United States economy is a multi-trillion-dollar economy. So you have to ask yourself, out of these multi-trillions of dollars, like, what piece of the pie can I get? Because in any society you live in, you should be taught how to thrive in that society until you build your own, right? So if you're living in this society, the people who have, critiques about capitalism, after they speak, they still want their lecture fee, right? I have people, I'm not, even the understanding of capitalism is very limited. People don't define it correctly. I would not say that I'm a capitalist, but I do understand how money works, and I understand business development. So even if you're living under socialism, you're still going to need businesses and you're going to need commerce. I think that what people complain about when they're talking about capitalism is putting money over people's lives, right? And that's not even a real, even European capitalism is an incomplete form of capitalism. They don't practice capitalism correctly, because, like, if you study, and I'm answering your question, I want to answer it very thoroughly because you're talking about a new economic system, and that's too, but that would predicate people understanding like what economic systems are. And so capitalism, if you look at the definition of capitalism, capitalism is defined as the efficient use and reinvestment of capital. That's the basic definition of capitalism. The efficient use and reinvestment of capital. So then the question begs, what is capital? And we find out that in Europe, under European thought, they define capital as goods and money, right? So if you then go back to the definition, it would be the efficient use and reinvestment of goods and money, right? The problem is that there are more than just two forms of capital. There are more forms of capital than just money and goods. There's environmental capital and there's human capital. So they're missing two out of the four. And that's based on values. So now if you consider human capital to be part of capital, that means that you would have the efficient use and reinvestment of human beings or into human beings. So the investment into human beings is like how you invest into your children. You want them to be healthy. You try to put, a good roof over their head so that they'll grow to be healthy adults, and they'll even grow to be adults. You want to keep them from violence so that they actually don't get killed. Your parents are making investments into their children. That's human capital. And you're, ostensibly trying to make sure they get a good education so that they'll be productive human beings and that they won't grow up in poverty. Every parent wants that. No parent wants their child to grow up in poverty. I don't care if you have a capitalist critique or not. No parent wants their child to grow up in poverty. So that's the investment into human capital. And the investment into environmental capital is you don't pollute your environment, right? You treat nature well, and you make sure that nature is actually invested in. That's what the whole thing about, using solar energy instead of using oil that's going to pollute the environment. It's the efficient use and reinvestment of environmental capital. The problem is that European economics does not value human beings or the environment. So they have an incomplete definition of capitalism and an incomplete practice of capitalism. So even that's why capitalism has gotten such a bad taste, is that it's defined under European norms and values. But if you were to actually add human capital, environmental capital to it, which they don't, then you would have more of a complete understanding of what capitalism is. Now, one of the things about capitalism and socialism is that capitalism rewards innovation because of the competition in the market, right? Where if you have a situation where you have capitalism, you have socialism. I prefer socialism under the modern day context because it tends not to leave people behind, and people get certain guarantees like healthcare, education, all that. You're not going to have people saddled in student debt where the whole society goes in to chip into every individual's education, every individual's healthcare, and what have you. The problem, however, is innovation. So people are incentivized to innovate under capitalism because of the rewards that come with inventing the first airplane, right? The rewards that come with inventing the automobile, the rewards that come with inventing, an herb concoction that works better than another herb concoction, right? You get more of the reward for being the first one out to come up with these things, inventing the internet, inventing a computer, inventing an electric car. So you get a lot of innovation under the system of capitalism that you might not see under socialism, and people have to make a determination what is what. However, we are living under European capitalism when you're living in America, and the question is, how do you leverage that for yourselves as a Black person, a person of African descent? And what I do is that the money that I make from the American economic system, for instance, so I do have a company in the United States, but I also have a company in Africa. I have a construction company. I have a construction company in Ghana where we're building sustainable homes and also water systems. So we just finished a project in, March of this year before the whole pandemic started to hit hard. I was in Ghana from November or October to March. And we were working on building what you call cisterns, which is rainwater catchment systems. So that when rain falls, you catch that rainfall, it goes into a concrete enclosure, underground enclosure where the water settles. And then you pump the water out and filter it out. And, one rainfall can fill up that 40,000 gallon cistern in one day. And you're able to use that water for 9-10 months without any more rainfall, sometimes a year and 3 months, depending on the size of the cistern. So I saw it as a complete solution for water issues in Africa. So I went ahead and did it. And the way I was able to fund my construction company was with stocks that I owned. So I sold the stocks. I sold, a few of the stocks that I owned because I've been investing. I've been an investor in Tesla since 2015. I've been an investor in Bitcoin since 2012. So instead of going to a bank to borrow money, or to friends and family to borrow money, or to venture capitalists to borrow money, or to get investments in my company, I was able to fund my construction company on my own. You see, so these are the types of things that I would encourage people to do, is to understand things like the stock market, understand cryptocurrency, leverage it for your benefit so that you can use that money into more growth vehicles. Because the science of wealth and the science of poverty is simply this. If your money is directed towards things that lose value, like cars, clothes, strip clubs, whatever, that get no return on investment, you're actually running towards poverty. If your money is being funneled in a direction towards growth vehicles like stocks, business development, real estate, you're actually running towards wealth. That's the equation. That's financial literacy. Every dollar you spend, you should make a judgment about that dollar and where it's going. Is it going towards a depreciating entity, or is it going towards an appreciating entity? You know, when you pay your bills, is this money growing or is this money lost? Right? Most of the time it's money lost.
Right.
That's why people who are developing wealth simplify their life and have very little bills. People who are beginning their wealth building because they want the money. If they have $100, how much of that is going to be spent towards money that goes down the drain or money that grows? And this is very important. And when I talk about growth, I'm not talking about small growth. I'm talking about, like, you know, in the last, you know, if you'd invested in Tesla 5 years ago, you'd have over 10x your money. You know, I can go through the statistics. I can go through it because I own stock and I can look at the numbers. And you can turn $10,000 into $100,000 over a 5 years period if you invest in the right stocks. Whereas if you put that money in the bank, your savings account, the bank is going to give you 0.1% yearly. Whereas, you know, for instance, if you invested in, I'll just name a couple stocks. If you invested in Tesla, let's say you invested in Tesla a year ago, you would have 6x'd your money. So if you put $10,000 into Tesla 1 year ago today, you would have $60,000 in 1 year. That same money, if you put into a bank, you would only get 0.1%, which is like $100, something like that, like $100. So 60,000 compared to 10,100. You see, and then we can look at 5 year times from Amazon. We can look at these different, you know, and these are companies that most of you listening to have already put your money in as a customer, right? So if you're a customer for these companies, you might as well become a stockholder and let your money grow. But we're not being taught that in school. So this is what I would just tell people to do is, where do you want to be in the next 5 years? Where do you want to live? What type of cash flow you want to have? Like, actually write it down. Like, all things being good, in the best case scenario, where would you want to live? Like, I'm going to ask you,
right,
in the next 5 years, where would you, I don't know where you live now. What city are you living in?
I'm based in Baltimore right now.
Okay, you're in Baltimore. If you had your choice, I'm talking about the sky's the limit. I don't care if you say Aruba. I don't care if you say Bali. In the next 5 years, in 2005, November 2005, if you could wave a magic wand, where would you live?
For me, I think it would be a little bit difficult because I'm still like trying to figure out the country in Africa. But it'll be, I guess my top 5, like Costa Rica's default, right? I'm probably gonna be there in the next few months. But Ghana, Sierra Leone, Uganda, South Africa, somewhere, Johannesburg, maybe. Like those would be like my top.
Okay,
top spots.
Great. So let's deal with Africa. Let's say Ghana. 5 years from now, you're living in Ghana. That would put a smile on your face, right? Okay.
Sure.
All right. Where are you living? What type of house are you living in? Yeah. What type of house are you living in? Are you living by the beach? Are you living on the mountain?
Yeah,
Where
so
you live?
it would definitely be I mean, the water is always great, but in the community, and like I'm very simple. Like I'm like almost a dome houseboat type house, like not really.
Yeah, and I know a brother named Brandon. He's a Black American brother who was from Florida. He lives in Ghana. And he has a construction company. He builds dome houses. Brandon Rogers. I can link you up with him. He's a Facebook friend of mine. His name is Brandon Rogers. He builds dome houses, literally. Okay? So now let's talk about that. You want to live in a dome house. 5 years from now, you'd like to see yourself in Ghana living in a dome house, right? The question is, how much would that cost? Right? See, so what I do is I reverse engineer my visions. So I think about where I want to be and how I want to live, consider it a reality, then I work my way backwards. What would I have needed to do to have done to actually have reached that? So if you have this dome house, you live in a dome house, what type of income would you like to have had every month in terms of cash flow? Where you'd be happy. I'm not talking about you balling out, whatever, but you're just comfortable. You're not worried about nothing. How much a month would you need?
I guess I don't it really depends. Like to me it's really hard because like community is kind of more important than like this concept of lifestyle income. So it's like it really depends on like the kind of community I'm in. Like I really see myself in a community with multiple people with maybe dome homes or like that, growing our own food.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. No, that's fine.
That's
fine. That's fine. But you're still going to need some money in your pocket, right?
Yeah.
You're still going to need to be able to do some things if you want to start businesses, to maintain whatever it is. What would you be happy with in terms of cash every month that you're getting in? I don't care if you say $100. I don't care if you say $1,000, but like in your mind, what would you be happy with?
Yeah, again, I don't know, but I thought a number $1,000.
Okay, so if it's $1,000, then what you have to be able to say to yourself is, what vehicle can I use? I don't mean like a vehicle as a car, but I'm talking about what type of business vehicle can I use that I can make $1,000 a month? And that's actually relatively easy to figure out. Mm-hmm. This is what I'm saying. See, when people start thinking like this, now you start designing your life. Because by the time the 5 years, because 5 years is going to come anyway.
Right.
So if you start designing it now, by the time you hit 5 years, it's almost 80, 90% sure that you would be able to have $1,000 a month coming in from just having a product on Amazon, from having a website where you're selling something, or if you decide that you're going to monetize your channel on YouTube, where you're doing these types of things and posting videos, whatever it is that you decide that you're going to do, you can start doing it now and laying the foundation for it now, so that in 5 years you are living in that dome house and you got $1,000 a month and you can handle emergencies and do the things that you need to do. If you need to get a car, if you need to do whatever that you need to do. What I'm saying is that a lot of times people don't think this way. So the 5 years happens on us instead of us planning those 5 years and making sure we find ourselves in the 5 years in the place to where we want to be. So that's why I like to get people to think, because that's what I did for myself. And I found myself actually overperforming because I thought that way, where I'm actually doing a lot better in 5 years than I thought I would be doing because I planned it so well and I'm following the steps necessary.
Right. Yeah, I see that. So tell me this, when you think about this, I kind of had a question on the repatriating, relocating, or other countries, but I think that kind of answered that. So I want to go to so you talked about reading Malcolm X and knowing Malcolm X was a revolutionary, and I think he set a lot of revolutionaries in motion, and Marcus Garvey set him in motion, and and so on and so forth. When you're looking at retirement and freeing up your time, what's your thoughts, or how do you feel like people can use retirement for liberation? So it's good for an individual to be retired and have money, whatever, but if it's a collective thing, knowing that you still have to deal with white hegemony, European hegemony. So how do you suspect or advise people to use this concept of retirement, this concept of freeing up your time to actually focus on, liberation and things like that?
Okay, so generally when people talk about retirement, they're usually talking about stopping working a 9 to 5 in a job that you really didn't like, right? Because there are people who retire with a pension and they are entrepreneurs now, right? They're doing their own businesses because let me just tell you something, like for certain types of people, like you need something to do with your day, whether you're going to develop hobbies or whatever. I don't care what it is. Like there's only so much sitting around drinking a pina colada and, you know, watching sports until you start getting a little antsy and you want to do something with meaning. And those of us who are Pan-Africanists and those people who want to see our people do better as African global people, we want to be able to lend our intellectual, our heart, and our monetary resources towards the betterment of our people. And so I'm going to tell you this is that, like, you know, we can give speeches, we can give, you know, lectures, we can do whatever, but that's not what's going to free up our people. You know, what happened is that a lot of our people try to model our lives. You know, when we decided we want to be, you know, revolutionaries after someone like a Malcolm X or Marcus Garvey, these people. And what happens is that we model our lives after, you know, being public speakers because that's what they were. But what is going to liberate our people is, to be completely honest with you, Africa needs industrialization. We need factories. You see, if you are not able to mass produce what you need, you end up buying it from other people who mass produce what you need. And you end up giving your money to them and feeding their economy. This is the central problem with Black folks worldwide, is that we are not the top of technology and we are not at the top of manufacturing. So I'm saying right now, like after all of it's said and done, after the marching, after the lectures, after reading the books, after having debates, after philosophizing, we're going to have to build factories, particularly as Black men. And I'm really at the point where I think that African men are going to be valued and judged in the next generations based on the factories that they own. See, this is what happened in China. And that's a longer story. I don't want to get into it, but like, you know, people go to Africa because they want the raw materials of Africa. I'm talking about the Chinese, the Europeans, and they want African land to set up factories because of the supply chain issues. And I'm just going to say it very, very quickly. I mean, this could be a whole podcast unto itself, but the science of supply chain says that you should have your factory as close as possible to your raw materials. So what happens is that they dig the raw materials out of Africa and they put them on a boat and have them processed in Europe or in China. That's actually inefficient in terms of supply chain logistics. So what they really want is they want African land to set up the factories, because they say Africans ain't doing it. So they're going to set up the factories next to the raw material, whether it be bauxite, where they use for aluminum, iron ore, fields and things like that to create iron and steel for industrialization, which everyone needs to build roads, to build factories, what have you, to be able to be competitive. They want the African land, and African land is a piece of real estate on earth, which means that Black folks worldwide are going to have to get very serious about industrialization and owning factories. So that's what I'm on right now. And I would say that any of our people who have retired and who have, you know, that entrepreneurial bug, I'm going to tell you that if you're in Africa and you've retired from anywhere in the world, you're receiving a pension if you work for the U.S. Post Office. Because I know people like this. I know people who worked for the post office for 40 years and now they live in Africa and they're living a great life in Africa, but their hands are itchy because they're getting their check and they don't want to just be sitting around in the sun all day long. They don't want to be sitting around drinking pina colada on the beach all day long. They're over that. They want to do something meaningful. Those of us who are into the consciousness, and they're looking for different things to do, different things to invest in. I can't think of anything better than for us to start owning factories. I'm talking about, if you're interested in dome houses, the factory material that we use for the dome houses, like, it needs to be made by us. whatever it is, it needs to be made by us so that we will be so self-determinative and independent. So I'm going to just throw that out there for all of our people who are, hit the retirement age and are looking for economic development. The best form of economic development that you can do is to actually own a factory in Africa.
But tell me this, as we're wrapping up, any questions from the YouTube people or the Facebook, please chime in before we finish up. I want you to close with any things that you got going on, any things that people can be a part of, but also just like, and I know you mentioned some resources earlier, but resources and advice for people to prepare for that next level. And I like how the conversation just organically grown into like purpose, right? Because the concept of retirement is almost like achieving something. And I think you laid it out really well to where you can achieve that immediately whenever you're ready. And what that's supposed to look like should be within your design. So any advice or resources to help people get to the next level or prepare for the next level?
I'm going to say to people, don't let happiness happen by accident. Your happiness should happen on purpose. You should plan it. Your happiness should be planned. Planned happiness is what I'm talking about, not accidental happiness, right? Now, number two, in terms of resources, the most important book I would recommend people is The 4-Hour Work Week. It gives you a step-by-step guide as to how you can be free, leveraging the internet and international business without having to be hands-on, owning product and developing product and shipping it to anywhere in the world with great customer service. So The 4-Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss, we'll line that up for you. I would also tell people that, at the end of it all, Africa is the round table. It's the most valuable piece of real estate. And our problems stem from the fact that all of us are seen to come from a continent that you can do anything to without repercussions. And so those of us who are serious, we're going to have to develop Africa. No Black people's problems will be solved worldwide without the development of Africa and Africa being taken very seriously as a superpower. So that's where we're at. That's what we're doing. Anyone want to reach out to me? We have herbalresults.net where you can get products anywhere in the world. We ship, and we're dealing with high blood pressure. In America, the number one cause of death is heart disease. The number 2 cause of death is cancer. The number 3 cause of death is actually iatrogenics. Iatrogenics means death by doctor. And the number 4 cause of death is respiratory illnesses. And that's even before COVID, this whole COVID thing. So I'm just letting people know that we do have solutions to that at herbalresults.net. We match it with people's testimonies, and we match what we're saying with scientific studies that all come from the United States National Institute of Health. So we're not making any of this up. We're very serious about what we do. I have a construction company in Africa, in Ghana and Rwanda, and it's called Sustainable Results Construction and Development. And we build solutions for people in terms of housing, sustainable solutions with solar, and also water solutions. So that's what we're doing. I have a YouTube paid YouTube channel where I interview people from all around the world. I also did a free training for people for stocks, how I buy stocks and how I make money in stocks. I have a free video on how to reverse just about any illness. And that's under my name, Heru Ofori-Atta, on YouTube. So you can go there and get any resources from me that you have. You can link me up there. And, we got some really interesting things coming up in the next year or two. I'm looking to start a mortgage fund for Africa, where people will be able to have a mortgage to buy homes in Africa. And the mortgage rates in the African banks are too high right now. And I'm looking to be able to do much better in terms of being able to give people mortgage rates that they can afford. So we're working, man. We're doing things and we're making it happen. We're not really using any banks. We're using our own money. We're investing wisely. We're taking care of our health. We're making sure that we stay young. We do the things that keep us young. You know, we do the exercise, we run sprints. That's very important. Many of y'all over 40, when's the last time you ran a sprint? You see what I'm saying? We used to do that as children all the time. We stop these habits, and then our bodies start really showing us what we haven't been doing in the form of having, you know, excess weight. We get the sunshine, we take our vitamin D3 supplements, we do all of that so that aging will not be a painful process. You know, we may get gray hair, but we still look as fit as we were when we were 21. So that's what it's all about, man. It's just understanding what life is, applying the formulas for success in the field of health, in the field of ethics, in the field of business, and telling people how to do it freely so that they can replicate happiness. But remember, your happiness has to be intentional and it has to be planned. It cannot be accidental. Most people's happiness is accidental. They haven't planned it. So we're looking for people to make that shift. And I'd just like to say, Geechee Motivator, thanks for having this show, man. And thanks for reaching out to me. And I hope that this was helpful to your listeners and your watchers.
Thanks for your time, man. And thank y'all for watching and rewatching. You can share at any time and still engage with us in the comments even after the broadcast is finished. So catch y'all next time.
All right.